Our show gets absolutely no corporate money. We are completely independent and partially funded by patrons like you. So to become a patron of the show, visit patreon.com/actout. This week on Act Out, big oil and gas pay a small fine so that they can keep on polluting. Next up, your solidarity is needed in an upcoming week of action against the Bayou Bridge Pipeline. Not in the bayous? Well, you don't have to be. This affects us all. Finally, the impact of dirty energy on Black and Brown communities, plus community organizer Maurice Cook joins us to talk white supremacy, the importance of battling racism, of recognizing Black history, and how to organize together in our place and time. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out.
Rockets! Brigade! Bulldozers swarm outside the checkpoint gate. An orange flash broke the hush and blew me into the street. I awoke next to the body of my baby. No!
Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. As Naomi Klein put it, it's not about carbon, it's about capitalism. Our system is literally and figuratively fueled by the destruction of planet and people for profit. And while the appointment of a former Exxon exec as Secretary of State is perhaps the most overt representation of our suicidal plundering, we've been experts at this for a long time. But as the effects of human-made climate change become ever more acute and dangerous, our continued failures to address our slow suicide, not to mention homicide with regards to countless species of plants and animals, as we continue this slip into a dystopia of climate catastrophe, the capitalist paradigm becomes all the more devastating. For those of you who follow the show, you'll know that we've been covering the Mariner East 2 pipeline and the resistance camp up in Pennsylvania, Camp White Pine. Well, in early January of this year, the DEP suspended construction based on numerous reports of spills and permit violations. Roughly a month later, the DEP announced that work could resume following a $12.6 million fine. The DEP then pats itself on the back for its quote-unquote strict oversight. Sunoco complains about the egregious fine, which is barely a drop in the oil barrel for them, and then happily carries on with construction, which, according to reports on the ground, never actually stopped anyway. And as soon as construction was officially allowed to continue, reports of toxic sludge flowing freely into backyards came quickly. Landowner and father Eric Friedman took this video at his home on February 11th.
Now we're breaching and forming mud pits in the side yard. And it's obviously changed the contour of our yard, given the fact that everything was cut down. We have nothing to catch the rain anymore, no grass, no vegetation. It's just pure runoff. And you can see the sludge, the just nastiness of this sludge that is going to sit here for who knows how long, and what bacteria and crap that it's going to bring into my yard and expose our kids. And again, thanks to our friends at Sunoco. You can really get a good sense of where it's flowing.
That strict oversight is really working out, DEP. Careful you don't sprain something overseeing so hard. Not to mention Sunoco's concern for the safety of the communities in which we work and operate, the safety of our employees, and the safety of the environment. I can only assume, then, that Sunoco would be willing to stand by, or preferably in, that sludge in order to prove that it's perfectly safe. As of this taping, Sunoco hasn't responded to that request. Meanwhile, Pennsylvania isn't the only place that Sunoco and its subsidiary Energy Transfer partners are wreaking havoc. You may also recall from a while back that we covered the proposed Bayou Bridge Pipeline, and again, the resistance camp L'Eau et la Vie in Louisiana. Well, earlier this year, construction officially began on the 162-mile-long pipeline amid a flurry of legal battles and strong opposition from a wide array of community members and allies. The camp, which we covered in episode 126, won a small victory earlier this month when ETP announced that they'd be constructing the pipeline around the camp rather than through it. And Well, that's nice for the camp, but the objective was always to stop the pipeline, not just save a small corner of land threatened by it. Still, camp leaders feel that if they are able to stop the pipeline in that small corner, others can do the same. And it is in this spirit that organizers are calling for solidarity in next week's Week of Action. Between February 26th and March 4th, organizers are asking people wherever they are to plan events targeting financial institutions and the Army Corps of Engineers to say no Bayou Bridge. Via the Week of Action site, you can find a list of primary and secondary targets along with locations of those targets that are closest to you. Visit nobayoubridge.global to get plugged in and activated. And for those of you who feel detached from the fight, it's not in my backyard, it's not in my community, allow Cherie Fointlin, a leader of Loa Levy Camp, to explain. While it is true that we are asking you to take action in solidarity with us to stop Bayou Bridge, this struggle goes far beyond this one pipeline. Energy Transfer Partners has poisoned our water, contaminated our lands, disrespected our cultures, and dehumanized our existence for long enough. We are asking you to join us in bringing justice to this matter of corporate violence. Maybe this administration and its agencies are too weak to hold Energy Transfer Partners accountable, but together the people are not. I believe that it is time that we let this be known. On the website, you can also find ways to help the camp directly via donations of supplies, money, and spreading the word. Wherever you are, this is your frontline fight. The Bayou Bridge Pipeline fight is one that encompasses several issues. The most obvious is, of course, the issue of the environment, but a little less obvious at first look is the issue of white supremacy and colonialism. Just as we saw with the Dakota Access Pipeline being rerouted away from white folks so as to cross sacred indigenous land, the Bayou Bridge Pipeline is cutting across predominantly black, brown, and indigenous land. This is neither coincidence nor accident. Dirty energy projects overwhelmingly spring up through or next to black and brown communities. In November of 2017, the Clean Air Task Force and the NAACP released a report that documented the health impacts of air pollution from oil and gas facilities on African American communities. The findings were a powerful and clear representation of the climate injustices perpetrated by capitalism, one that's founded on colonialism and white supremacy. Among the facts uncovered by this report were the following points. More than 1 million African Americans live within a half-mile of existing natural gas facilities. Over 1 million African Americans live in counties that face a cancer risk above EPA's level of concern from toxics emitted by natural gas facilities. More than 6.7 million African Americans live in the 91 counties with oil refineries. Keep in mind that African Americans represent roughly 13% of the U.S. population, and yet in Michigan, Louisiana, and Pennsylvania, for example, 40% of people living in counties with refineries were African American. In Tennessee, 54% are African American. Overall, the study found that nationally, African Americans are 75% more likely than Caucasians to live in fence-line communities, those next to commercial facilities whose noise, odor, traffic, or emissions directly affect the population. 75% more likely. And the perpetuation of unequal access isn't just about clean air. It goes to education, overall healthcare, food, jobs, even things like recreation. This disproportionate reality is one that I recently sat down and discussed with community organizer Maurice Cook. As a black man who has organized, fought, and built for decades, Maurice gives deep, powerful, and poignant commentary on the foundation and continuation of white supremacy in this country. The work of fighting racism, of honoring black history, and of coming together to fight and build in our place and time. Take a look.
If you can't take care of the people right around you, then what are you doing there? It has to start from the ground level, the people within your own community. I think that, of course, there are very important issues that need the scope of national attention. There's no question in that. But what keeps people in the same place is that those that live around them are disconnected to them. Mm-hmm. So when a family needs support and they look for a national organization to provide it, there's a huge disconnect. Mm-hmm. A national organization can't address some of the very specific issues that families deal with in marginalized communities. That has to happen on your street. It has to happen in your neighborhood. It has to happen in your city or town.
So talk about Serve Your City and how that got started and what specifically that does in terms of the local organizing.
Serve Your City got started because I'm an angry black man, and it's an expression of what I experienced via my own education, being raised in Montgomery County and having access to so many resources and so many opportunities. And moving here to DC and always being connected to DC from being raised right outside the city and having family living here in the city, there was just a huge disparity in the opportunities and resources and access from the county versus what was going on in the city. And Serve Your City is more of an expression of how the city has changed, right? Where now we have various classes of people who actually live within the city and access its educational system. And when that happened, because I'm right in between the era of white flight and gentrification, right? The 80s, when we were the murder capital and all of that. That was my heyday, coming up as a young college student at Howard University. So the city had changed over the course of the 80s and the 90s, and families started staying and sending their kids to the schools. And now what you have is the very divergent educational outcomes for black and brown people versus the white counterparts, students who come from more affluent families. And it's causing an even larger gap and for all of us as a society. But locally, there's no reason, now that we do have said resources, I wanted to find a way to channel those resources to the people who need it the most. My goal with Serve Your City is to ensure that all white spaces are invaded. That's our goal. It's important on so many levels. I think our segregation from one another is what leads to so many of our societal ills. That's one issue. And the access issue, right? Not being able to access quality programs and quality opportunities at a young age has such an impact upon your level of engagement in said activities as you grow up. I just want to be the bridge to ensure that the black and brown children that I serve get the same, not more, but just the same.
So what kind of resources is it that when you say that we now have access to those resources, what specifically are you talking about?
Many of the extracurricular programming, the after-school programming, many of the exquisite things that you see generally most white folks participate in for their kids, pay for their kids to participate in. We try to take the cost out of it. And what we've done so far, don't laugh, is we've built the only majority-minority rowing crew here in the city. Awesome. We have a financial literacy program with the IMF. We have a yoga program, white spaces. We have a swim, snorkel, scuba diving instruction program. Awesome. With the goal of using scuba to afford me to go around the world and visit every island, but while doing good work. So we also play tennis as well. So these programs generally are not programs that are very popular in the African American community. Mm-hmm. And the only reason why they're not very popular in African American communities is because they don't have access to these programs due to affordability at a young age. The reason why certain things only happen to certain people is because everyone doesn't identify with one another, right? Mm-hmm. But if you have these kids participating specifically in these athletic activities, it's a way to build kind of a unified identity on both sides.
So, and this is this is one project that you're doing, but you also do a bunch of other projects. So talk a little bit about the other projects that you do, like the March for Racial Justice, your work with the homeless population in DC.
Yeah, so it is very important to do what I can to be a bridge to ending and dismantling white supremacy. White supremacy is what separates all of us. It is intended to do so. And programs like Serve Your City and others, and certainly organizing, for marches, gives everyone an opportunity to share space and express their dismay and their frustration about our white supremacist system. And we have to be very intentional about our actions in dismantling said system. It continues to not only destroy lives physically, but certainly psychologically and emotionally. We are in a pickle right now because we have the external outward expression of white supremacy in our current leadership. White supremacy has always been dangerous, and it's been there from George Washington through Trump. And it is a system. It's an institutionalized system. This has been a great opportunity for us to have the conversation and to say that we need more white people to participate in this work with us. Because racism, sexism, misogyny, it destroys all of us. It impacts all of us, and it takes away the quality of all of our lives. We all carry so much pain, so much hate and frustration from these issues.
So what would you say to white people that might ask, like, well, what can I do to try and dismantle white supremacy?
Talk to your Uncle Joe. Stop pretending as if you don't know anyone who's racist. Talk to your people. Stop pretending as if you're not a part of this. That would be a good start.
the multi-step process, that's the first step. So with that, also, I want to talk, because some of the conversations that we've had hinge on the issue of, like, sort of the problem on the left, our affinity to go at each other as opposed to focusing our anger outwards and our energy outwards to the systems that we're fighting. Talk a little bit about what you've experienced and how you feel that we might be able to combat some of the leftist infighting problems.
It makes sense because many people for the first time are feeling institutionalized oppression. And most of us, no matter what your background, what your racial, economic background is, most people are too disengaged to fight it on head on, to directly fight it. It's too big. And when something's too big, we get frustrated. And we look to those who are closest to us, right? It is very big. I just feel that we have to be more strategic, and we have to be more loving to one another and understanding. And it's hard. It's not easy. It's very frustrating. I mean, I also believe that we are very privileged right now because most people didn't experience what we experienced down in Charlottesville, where, that racist could care less about our individual issues with one group to another. He just put his foot on the gas. He could care less. We were all the same to him for that moment. We are not directly impacted yet in a way where it will bring us together. But those of us who shared that experience, we know how blind this stuff is, and that the folks on the other side, some of them, they don't make these distinctions between our political differences of being kind of middle of the road versus far left radical. They could care less. If we're in the crowd together, then we're their enemy.
with that sort of going from the white supremacy conversation to it's currently Black History Month. And
Woohoo.
yeah, and I would like to get your thoughts on that, but also sort of in this cocoon of white supremacy that we live in. A lot of times, a lot of things that I'll see pop up with the Black History Month hashtag or something is like, why do we always have to make it about race? So, with that, what is your feeling on that question, and then also your feelings about Black History Month and what it should be about?
That question, it's very interesting. You know, it's the mythology of America, right? That creates that question. There was a point in history where there were captives who came from the continent of Africa who didn't know each other, spoke different languages, different cultures, but were brought together from a system of internal slave trading within Africa. The European powers fighting to create trails from the inland of Africa to the coast. And our parents came together first, you know, in the slave castles. We weren't black then, but we became a people then. And Black history to me is acknowledging those survivors and the ones that made so many sacrifices for us to be here today. The door of no return in the slave castles in Ghana and Benin, you know, those people, my parents, you know, some of white people's parents too, that they don't even know, but they'll do their DNA and they'll see. But those folks, they built a hemisphere for free. They built a hemisphere. And I have to honor them. They're nameless. I have to honor them. We all do. We all have to honor those folks who survived. Survived the Middle Passage, survived seasoning, survived the auction block. These are our parents. And, you know, they're lost in a way. And because of them being lost, we're lost children. We're lost people. Our identity is, you know, tied to the sustainability of white supremacy. I would give them this if you ask me why do we have to honor Black history. You know, I would tell them, you would not be white without us. So honor that, because it gave you a group identity. You were no longer from Greece or Italy or France or Germany or Scotland or Ireland. You became a unified race because you're always juxtaposed against us. So think about that as the impact of Black people in this society. It is possible to have something to not be about white Americans, but significant all the same. It's possible. It's a tough concept for some to swallow. Yes, there is some centering going on.
And is that why a lot of your work focuses on kids and the educating of kids to...
Yes, I'm a control freak. And I am trying to create the outcome that I want. And kids, they're free of all this. I grew up very working class in a rich area. And so I know the sting of not being able to afford to do something that I wanted to do. And I just can't have that on my watch. My success, my happiness, unfortunately, is tied to my ability to give what I can and help whomever I can with the resources I can access. And I don't just do that with kids. I try to do that with, homeless folks, especially folks who were born and raised in the city, who can no longer afford to live here, and all of us are being built on top of, and people there are schemes and strategies to remove the poor, the working poor, and the poor from this city, and we have to be intentional about making it as hard as possible. I do believe, unfortunately, that capitalism, white supremacy will win. I see it. I mean, everyone, you see a crane, you know you've lost. But I do intend to organize as many people as possible to make it as torturous for them as possible, as much as I can. And that's it. Yeah, that's
like
it.
a Huey P. Newton revolutionary
Exactly.
suicide.
Exactly. They would go out burning, you know. And they need the threat. Unfortunately, they need the threat. You can only push at people so far. Really, you can only push enough people so far. And this administration does a great job of doing our work for us, but they've been the greatest recruiter to radical action that I've seen in my lifetime. I mean, you know, as a kid of the 70s, I never thought that this time would come. It's my disappointment in us that drives me so hard. I'm so disappointed. You know, it's just so disappointing to live through this time. All the work that was done to give the opportunities that we've gotten to take advantage of, you as a woman, me as an African-American man, and for those things to be challenged, and to see so many people still be so disengaged because they don't feel as if it touches them. It's just, I'm disappointed in us. What say you? A little disappointed?
Yes, as you know. But would you say that there's some hope in there, or is
Absolutely.
it like...
You know that. You know, yes, absolutely. And I am always going to be here to, when those eyes, you know, expand and you see the world as it is, I'm going to be your best friend. And you have an infrastructure to do your work.
To find out more about Maurice's work, visit serveyourcitydc.org. And that will do it for this week's Dose of Dissent. Thank you so much for watching. Please spread and share this with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. Check out the last slide and the show description to find sites mentioned in this week's show. And for interim updates, as well as posted videos, images, and articles, visit us on our social media sites. From the Devil's Den, good night and act out. And real quick, to keep independent, non-corporatized media like this show going, donate at Occupy.com/donate. If you'd like to donate directly to Act Out, visit Patreon.com/actout.
I can hear the boots are stomping. Come on, boys, let's get some rocks to throw. I can't stand to hear my father cry anymore. Time we left one of you motherfuckers dead in the road. We've been begging up inch by inch, we got nowhere else to go. It's been too many years since your push to serve my shove. I'm not a violent man.